One of the main qualities that I see great founders is they ask the right questions.
At what point do they need to take the strategy hat off, put the execution hat on? How do you coach somebody through that process?
The two can be so contradictory, in opposition of each other, because how much strategy is appropriate versus the execution, and then how much execution do you need to be able to come up with a strategy? Secretly, founders want investors to make their life easier.
Sure.
Realistically, it's the opposite. I warned a founder the other day. He was talking, he was super excited, and I set him up with an investor. He was saying, what about this exit? What about that? And I said, listen, as soon as we take $1, we no longer work for ourselves. Your opinion doesn't matter.
Welcome to the CEO and the Salesman podcast, where we interview founders, industry leaders, and of course, CEOs about what it actually takes to make it in the world of startups and scale-ups. Today, we're joined by Ed Kang. Ed is the Chief Strategy Officer over here at startups.com and also multiple exits, multiple businesses, author, gas station owner, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I just found out he's a gas station owner. So we're going to talk about that as well. So today we're going to talk about what it actually, as I said, what it actually takes, but not only that, but the strategy versus execution, where founders get themselves tripped up, and what it's actually like to advise hundreds and hundreds of startup founders over the course of the years. So welcome, Ed. Welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Mate, it's been a real pleasure. I've seen you. I've been on calls with you a whole bunch of times. I'm part of the startups.com network as well. I think it's a fantastic thing. But what I really love about our conversations and the conversations you have with the group is the way that you think about how founders are, I guess the dichotomy of strategy versus execution and how they work. So I want to hit straight into psychology here. So founders are always being told to be resilient, right? So resilient and hustle and just get the work done. At what point do you feel that resilience becomes stubbornness and a blocker to progress?
That's a really great question. And I think that's where false resilience or bravado, in many ways, I often talk about this cognitive bias called Dunning-Kruger effect. And that's when you know a little, but you think you're an expert, and you can sort of parade that around as, hey, I'm being resilient. It's always that balance because, we say to founders all the time, especially I've learned by investing in founders when I was a general partner at a venture fund and continue to be an angel investor. You're looking for those founders that are disagreeable to a certain extent, but not to the point where they're neurotic or they're sort of masquerading with that quasi pseudo resilience. And so I think it's very important to ground what you call resilience in a mindset, value system, and be ultimately accountable. Have people who look at your blind spots, like my wife. She'll call me out on stuff. She knows nothing about business, but she'll be like, you know what, that's total BS. I think that's BS. And, after a certain point in time, like you can continue to flog a dead horse as you will, and fall into the other cognitive biases such as sunk cost fallacy, where you're saying, no, I'm, hanging in there. I'm hustling. I'm doing the right thing. But it ends up just being in a bad spot. And there's been several books written about it. I think Seth Godin wrote one about the curve or, quitting at the right time. There's been individuals who've written so much about what happens inside of our heads. And I think this is a really great conversation to have and ask the questions like, when does it become inappropriate or maladaptive to what we're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I love that. So if you looked at a startup and let's say, you've run many and you've advised hundreds. So if you look at that startup and diagnose it like a doctor, what are the patterns that you see 6 months before the fall that some of our audience might be seeing? Well, they might want to do a bit of self-reflection over time. They go, well, actually, maybe I'm got that characteristic.
That's really fascinating. I'm glad you brought up the word diagnostic because one of the core issues comes from that word. And I'll introduce everybody to this concept, the difference between diagnostic and dialogic. And this is something that was unlocked for me. It was about 2018. I got investment, and part of the investment was to move over to China to be the general manager or the CEO of the venture. And I was introduced to this field of organization development, which is different than organizational development that MBAs learn. And it's this multidisciplinary field that involves organizational psychology, social psychology, industrial psychology. And I was introduced to this concept called dialogic, which I define as finding logic in dialogue, meaning that what you may think is right or good versus bad may not be appropriate for that moment. And it's taking a very metacognitive approach. That's all complicated way to say what happens is if I go in and I diagnose, there are certain things that I can, like a doctor, I'll press until it hurts, such as cash flow issues, cap table issues, etc. But where I find founders really fumble the ball is they don't take the time to be dialogic, which is understanding that we live in our language, how we talk about things, and what is useful for us, because what I say is bad for your startup may not be bad from your perspective. For example, you may have the runway and the conviction to go and see it all the way through, no matter my opinions about it. How many founders have I met where I thought, I've diagnosed, I don't think they're going to be successful, and they proved me all wrong. And what I found, the secret is having a dialogue and saying, how do you define this? And when founders don't do that, they're not self-aware, that's when I say, you know what, we're headed probably in the wrong direction, because they haven't taken the time to just embrace the metacognitive flexibility that it requires to be a founder, because it's very difficult. The amount of iterations and pivots and assumptions that get invalidated. So back to the original question, it's I diagnose a startup in the warning signs based upon their inability to be dialogic about what they're trying to accomplish.
Fascinating. And so when you are thinking about that, and are there specific ways that shows up for people? Like, so let's sort of take out of the meta idea and come down to what does it actually look like on a daily, or on how they communicate?
Yeah, you bet. One of the main qualities that I see great founders who have this capacity, this metacognitive flexibility, be dialogic, is they ask the right questions. They don't ask the questions for specific answer. They're not fishing for what they want to hear. They'll ask questions like, what questions should I be asking that you're not hearing from me? They're willing to question a lot. Even if they have assumptions, they'll say, I could be wrong, but this is what I think. What do you think about this? And we're willing to go into that space where we'll discuss and say, the CEO, I'll digress for a moment. The CEO of startups.com, he has a really great way of saying, you're probably wrong and I'm probably wrong. Let's figure out how to find out. And that is a dialogic process unto itself. And the more founders ask questions about which questions to ask, what they should be learning, the better they are, the more they're going to be equipped, because it shows they have an open mindset. They have that growth mindset where it's not, it's this intrinsic value of having an internal locus of control versus blaming everybody else or just seeking positive reinforcement in their own echo chambers, which just ends up enabling them down all the wrong paths. So asking the right questions, being curious, that's probably one of the most important qualities that I've seen, because it also shows imagination. They dream possibilities. They know how to be relentlessly resourceful. And those are the types of founders I love investing in, whether it's capital, time, advice, you name it. That's what I see.
Very cool. So I want to move over to strategy versus execution reality. So when you think about that, where does so many founders are very, very capable, are very smart people. They're talking about strategy. At what point do they need to put the strategy hat, take the strategy hat off, put the execution hat on, and how do you coach somebody through that process?
Sure, it's a yin and yang. The two can be so contradictory, just in opposition of each other, because how much strategy is appropriate versus the execution, and then how much execution do you need to be able to come up with a strategy? And I liken it back to organization development. There's this concept, this theory called action research, and it was developed by one of the fathers of industrial psychology, social psychology, named Kurt Lewin. And he had this statement: no action without research, and no research without action. They fed into each other like the yin and yang. There's this flow into it. So strategy and execution is the same way. No strategy without execution, no execution without strategy. And founders can get tilted, or they can lean too heavily on one side. I remember a professor telling me, he said, it's like surfing. If I'm on a surfboard and I lean a little too far and I carve a little too deep this way, I'll completely lose it. And it's this constant bouncing back and forth. Like you're walking, you're using your two legs and you're getting that equilibrium. And that is the ultimate point, that divine edge, the divine path between the yin and yang. That's where you want to be. You don't want to be so far in a strategy without execution, and the opposite way around. You want to be walking that tightrope down the middle. That's how you achieve the best outcomes, by using both.
So do you then have a touch point on a regular basis? You know, we set the strategy, we're going for it, we're working away, we're pumping the handle, so to speak. Do you set in your startups and your businesses and the ones you advise, do you ask them to go back to strategy or to think about that on a regular basis? And is that in the calendar?
Right. Yes and no. Revisiting on a regular basis is very important to have this cadence, but it's like surfing or any type of extreme sport. You have to be in that moment. When you're out there and you're rock climbing or surfing or doing mountain biking, the parameters, the context changes in a fraction of a second. So I may be having a conversation and I find that we're thinking strategy, then automatically I'll say, great, what does the execution look like? But then let's say they come back and there's a round of execution, or they're working. I will stop them. I'll say, great, how is this informing our strategy? So I'll always go to the opposite side of where they are to try and create that equilibrium. So we're going back and forth and finding that divine path.
Love it. So Ed, I'm a salesperson, and most of my businesses I've basically, so as the saying goes, when all you have is a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. Yeah. So my answer to most problems is sell more,
sure,
make more money. So when you have founders come to you and say, we just need more leads, what's the actual problem? Have you found that there's actually a problem, or is it actually a lead problem, or is there something underlying in there that they should be thinking, well, I just need more leads, we're just going to hire a salesperson? What's the actual issue?
I think that, going back to what you're saying in terms of being a salesperson, I had a chairman who said, Ed, when in doubt, go make some money. Like, just go out and sell. And there's
like
just
that
something, yeah, you're right. There's just something, I'm sure you've experienced this. There's something just freeing about going out there and just getting on the front lines and getting your hands dirty and selling. That informs you a lot. So here's the crux of it. Founders will fall in one of two camps. One, it will be your problem is that you're just not going out there and getting enough shots on net. So it is about leads, and you're not selling. You are pontificating, you're strategizing, you're trying to come up with the cleverest way to scale your sales. And so you couch it and saying, oh, I don't have enough leads. But what you're really saying is, I'm not willing to go do the work to pick up the phone and contact people. Case in point, there's one gal, she got referred to me, networked her, and she said, you are conversation 51 or something like that. And she was coming out of a career transition. She said, I'm just going to network and I'm going to have 50 meetings. That's sales. And she learned so much from doing that. So that's the one side. But then there's the other side where it's important to balance. So let's say we have an individual like you, Matthew, who's really proficient at sales. I would question on whether your leads are the right leads. Because if you're raising money for your startup, that is going to matter. Yes, investors want you to get as much going, founder-led sales, learn as much, But after a point in time, just selling for selling's sake, getting leads just for the sake of leads is not going to help you with the unit economics, the product market fit, and ultimately the business model fit that you need to build a unicorn. So it gets more complicated. But in the beginning, most founders, they just need to get out there and build up the courage and feel what it's like to try and sell hand-to-hand combat, face-to-face. Go do it. You'll learn so much.
Love that. That's perfect. So I want to sort of change it again to thinking about, sales, because I love sales. And I know that selling, some founders are out there, all they're trying to do is raise capital, but that's a sale. And before they've gone and tried to sell their product. And so and I've seen, obviously I've been a fly on the wall on some of your conversations, whether you're helping people through, coaching on their pitch decks. What are the 2 or 3 main, blind spots that founders have when they're presenting their pitch deck to you, and what should they do about it?
First blind spot that happens every single time is they pitch themselves. So they pitch their startup or build their pitch deck, their unique value proposition, whatever it is, their thesis, their hypotheses that they're presenting to themselves. And of course they'd invest. They don't take a critical approach and step back and actually empathize with the investor, because of course I'd invest myself. It sounds really good in my head.
I'm brilliant.
Exactly. Like,
yeah.
I'm a genius. And that's what happens. Founders get caught in this cognitive bias where they're sitting in their laptop by themselves. And this goes back to sales. Going and actually selling breaks people out of this. But when they're planning, they're envisioning, they're imagining, they're prototyping, doing a Figma, whatever it is, man, that idea starts to sound so good in their head, and it just gets ginned up, and then they fall flat on their face. So that's the first one, is you're in your head, cognitive bias, you're pitching yourself. Second, beyond that, they end up pitching the customer, not the investor. Big difference. You're in sales.
What do you mean by that?
You got to know the audience.
Yep.
So if I am pitching an investor and I say, now with my solution, you can save 15% on your car insurance. Well, you're pitching the customer, because how do you know that investor has the problem? The investor doesn't care about their car insurance. They care whether you can sell the solution to millions of people, and you can sell to them. So you have to demonstrate you can speak that language and say, I know my customer and I know how to sell to them, but I'm going to pitch to you. And there's a delicate balance. And we see that in pitch decks with language like you, yours, everything, right? The last thing I would say is it relates to both, is that founders don't pitch the right investor. They don't understand who they're talking to when they start pitching the investor. So they'll pitch a seed investor a pre-seed round. They won't know the language. And it's hard because everybody thinks they know. It's that Dunning-Kruger effect. So they start using words like product market fit, and we're in our seed round. And I have to say, no, you're not. I talk to these investors, and I'll get into some arguments with founders, and I get it. They're hungry. They're often desperate, and they want it to work so bad, and they're putting their best foot forward. But taking a step back, zooming out, those are the 3 kind of main areas in progression that I see right away out of the gate. And then we got to get into actually building a proper startup that's investable after that.
Fantastic. So it feels like when you're speaking, and it feels like when you're advising, you actually really, really love this. So what role does joy play in your life and your role as founder, as also as advisor?
You've hit me in a very rare moment in time, Matthew, with certain interactions that I've had. I actually, and a lot of people may question this or even get offended, I don't enjoy advising founders. I don't.
Oh, really? Well, you're a good actor.
Yeah, I'm a good actor. I happen to be there, competent in it, but my joy comes from the freedom that I experience doing what I do. My joy comes from honing my craft so I'm competent. But I am wired for closure. And advising founders, especially early stages, has no closure. It's a constant, perpetual cycle wheel they're on. It's like the hedonic treadmill, right? You hit a moment where I think I'm happy with this, but then you're just not happy with it. The joy comes from when a founder gets it, when a founder goes through something and they're willing to be vulnerable and they're transparent and they say, I'm so glad I have this relationship with you. You taught me so much. I'm going to go apply it. I'm going to move on. And they leave the nest. To me, it seems counterproductive, but I get so much joy and it makes it so worth it when I talk to the founder that raised their round, got an accelerator. They're talking to VCs. They've got VCs on their cap table and they're too busy to need me to spend time at startups.com. They're out there crushing it. To me, that is ultimate joy to watch them go. But the process of advising, that is a day in, day out. That's an arduous task, especially with all the different plethora of types of founders in their different unique situations. It can be really taxing. So after a day, yesterday, I did 10 advisory sessions. I was a vegetable by the end of the day because it takes so much emotion to stay present and mindful and be helpful to a founder the way they deserve with their agency and sovereignty, how worthy they are, regardless of whether their startup is going to be successful or not, the dignity they deserve. That requires a lot of emotional investment that many people don't think about. And that's part of honing my craft. That's what I really enjoy, learning how to do that better.
So it's about communicating. So it's not necessarily about what you say, it's about how they understand it. And
they say, like, again, in sales, they'll tell you, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care type thing. And to me, that's coming from an executive coaching background and having lots of therapy and people help me. I've just found that that's so important to bring that because the failure rate of founders is so high. And therefore, what benefit are they going to get from my relationship, our relationship, beyond that black and white, I secured a $2 million investment, which very few are going to experience. We need to go deeper or else I probably wouldn't be doing it, because if that was just the surface level, what I'd have to do, it's not worth it for me to do it, to spend that
the
time.
metric of success is so skewed in the favor of entropy that we're you have absolutely got, you're not going to have much of a chance to find those moments.
That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so when you are advising, let's say these 10, and not necessarily want to pick on anybody in particular,
Right.
What's the bit of advice that you see gets walked past and ignored the most? Like the 2 or 3 bits of advice that you say, I really wish they really got this.
Number one, this is immediate. Make funding plan B. That's my number one.
Really? Wow. I mean, so many. I just want to stop there for a sec. That seems to be the freaking goal of everybody I talk to. It's like I saw a reel on Elon Musk the other day. All you got to do, as far as Musk is concerned, is get a couple of mates together, build a prototype, and then shop it around and get some money, and then you're in business.
Right.
Like it's all about do some things and then get money from somebody else.
Yes. Secretly, founders want investors to make their life easier.
Sure.
Realistically, it's the opposite. I warned a founder the other day. He was talking, he was super excited, and I'd set him up with an investor. And he was saying, what about this? And what about this exit? And what about that? And I said, listen, as soon as we take $1, we no longer work for ourselves. Your opinion doesn't matter. You are now beholden to the GP and the LPs and their investment thesis and the contract that you sign. I don't think it's quite what you think it is. But founders are looking for that to be rescued, if you will. And the founders that have experienced this, they all tell me, I wish I would have bootstrapped, or they just say, I didn't realize I have responsibilities now and it's a drag. And I wish founders would take the time. I say this every single meeting, take the time to just say, what would plan B look like? All right. If I had plan A to self-fund it, still do plan B, raise investment, but let's imagine a world where we can execute plan A, because that's what unlocks plan B. When you've got the revenue, when you've got all that going, investors then chase you, and founders just ignore that.
That's fantastic, and so much pressure and focus is put on raising that money. Certainly, since I've been in America the last couple of months, and just being part of the startup community in Australia, it's just unrelenting focus trying to sell that pitch deck. And I send you my deck. Can we get 5 minutes on the call? Whatever it is, and I've started about 6 companies and exited a couple of those. Some of them have not. The exit has been more forced upon me through lack of revenue. But overall, net, where I'm doing okay. But I've never raised capital. And so it's because I'm a salesperson. I go, well, I'll just go sell things. And I had no idea. My first business plan was with sale number 1, I buy a mini fridge for next to my desk. I mean, insane business plan, zero business plan. I was just good at selling some stuff and we just sold some things. So if you think about pitch decks, I'm going to stick on this one last time and then we'll move on. But if you think about pitch decks, is there an emotional trigger that you want to see in those pitch decks, or is it tactical, or is it strategic? What's the thing that you see that actually pitch decks go, we've got a thing, but this is what hooks investors in?
There's so much to go into that. I'm going to try and condense it down. It's just a loaded question. The complicated answer, let me give you a philosophical, abstract answer that will infuriate people. The emotional trigger that you want is not to have emotions in it. Here's what I mean. I get emotional when a pitch deck is clear, and it gives me, because of that clarity, a unique, novel insight. And because it's so clear, that founder has traction out in the marketplace, I immediately get emotional about that founder. I fall in love with that founder versus the founder that tries to impress me. And I talk to many investors who feel the same way with all the, this is my story and this and that. You may pull at my heartstrings, but I have a fiduciary responsibility to my LPs, to my wife, my spouse, who is the chairman and the primary shareholder of my emotional cap table, right? I have a responsibility, and so I can't get caught up in that emotion. How many checks, dumb angel checks I've written out of emotion? I haven't made a single dollar from them, and it's been irresponsible. Now, I'm happy to give back. I've been very fortunate, very blessed. That's why I do like to give back. But when you're dealing with LP's money, when you're dealing with an investment fund and 90% of those bets are going to fail, you can't have that type of emotion that founders think to draw them in. You will draw them in with that clarity because you've eliminated that emotion. You've made it so clear that you are the bet that is going to win. It's stone cold. That's the way to do it.
Fantastic. Love that. So I'm going to move over to sort of performance because you're a coach and I see a lot of coaching sort of in there. So in your book, the Cortex Circuit, you talk about using joy and you talk about using emotion as triggers to change state. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how, what's the practical thing that people listening to this episode could go, I'm going to use that to change how I'm actually going to create a performance accelerator in what I want to do.
You're bringing back the memories, man. It's been so long since I wrote that book, but I teach it every day in some form or another. I learned a long time ago, I got introduced to the world of effective neuroscience or positive psychology. And I was introduced to the emotion of joy, and it was reframed for me. We know joy, or traditionally we think of joy as being just very happy. But when it comes to effective neuroscience, there's actually parts of your brain that respond, and joy was redefined for me as being glad to be with someone in strength, but especially weakness. For example, between me and you, I have been vulnerable. I was having just a moment today, and I got to say, hey, I'm just going to be transparent and say I don't enjoy advising the same way that other people might define it. Well, something unlocks between us that I can go there with you, especially when we had a pre-conversation to this podcast and we're able to share. And you're giving me your reflections, and you're sharing also, hey, I failed before, some of these exits. And the fact that we are enjoying sharing that with each other does things to the neurochemistry in our brains, which unlocks what they call the happiness advantage. So it's this guy, Sean Acor, he wrote this book, and he said, most people think that they need to perform to be happy. If I just get that bonus, I'll be able to go on that vacation, I'll be happy. When effective neuroscience says, no, you actually have to feel happy to perform. It's the other way around. So I took that lesson, I began applying it, and I realized joy was an unlock that would naturally get my brain performing better. And I began working on those different techniques and began coaching other people, experiencing it myself, and just creating, what I call these little joy circles or these pods or these joy tribes. And that led to a theory that I have called joy effects, which is like network effects with joy. And beyond a shadow of a doubt, I would say the single greatest performance enhancement that I've experienced in my life has been to utilize the emotion of joy. It's a lot more complicated in terms of applying it, but just understanding, get around people who can give you emotional capacity that you're glad to be with in your strength, but especially weakness. Like my wife, I can go to her and put my head on her lap, and I can say, I'm a terrible founder, I'm a terrible advisor, I'm a terrible husband, I'm leading our family into ruin. And she'll say, there, she'll stroke my hair, and she won't try to fix me, which sucks the joy right out of the room. If she tries to fix, heal, convert, teach, or direct, the joy goes out of the room. Same thing in sales. When I do sales, I want them to feel glad that they can tell me all their problems. Instead of beating them over the head, pitch slapping them, where I've got an agenda, I'm trying to convert them, and I don't care about letting them be vulnerable with me. That interaction, that neurochemical interaction between me and that prospect is so much more enhanced when I use joy properly. And that's what the Cortex Circuit was all about, and I've enjoyed it since.
Mate, I absolutely love that. You were talking about selling, and one of the things that really always bugged me is I've done lots of sales training, of course, but the challenger process of being a salesperson is essentially trying to beat the customer to death by having them understand how dumb they are. Like, I can't imagine. It just blows my mind that was actually even a way to sell at any time. Maybe when you had to educate the customer what the internet was or what a server was, maybe. But boy, oh boy, I just find that when salespeople try to do that to me, it's so repellent that I don't need to feel bad. I don't know. Why should I feel bad to then buy from you? It's awful.
Right. And, to hearken it to sales, since we're talking CEO and sales conversations, if the battle is make it so that your value is undeniable and that individual, that prospect will feel stupid not to buy from you, I see that as a very valid strategy. But where does that end? Because someone's always going to have a better product. Someone's always going to figure out better ways to communicate, et cetera. So my whole thing is I may have a crappy product, but I'm going to make it so that you want to do business with me. You just love our relationship so much that you trust me. And you'll also be a point of feedback for me where I can improve the product, especially if you're a founder. And we've got a relationship. And that's the reason, when I do sales training, I got this from Chris Do. He does this podcast called The Future. He graphic design, right? Great guy. He defines sales as an acronym of serve, ask, listen, empathize, and summarize.
Love it.
So never in there is pitch, tell them the price. It's taking a position of service. And so if you can do that emotionally speaking, and just be that person where I know I sell, I'm amazing at sales, or I've nailed it. When I'm pitching to a boardroom, and this has happened before, and I thought it was inappropriate, but then I realized this is a competitive advantage. And the chairman or someone would say, hey, Ed, can you stay behind just after? And then they'll dump on me a personal situation or that they're trying to transition. And at first I was like, man, this is inappropriate. Like, I was just here to sell. But then I realized, wait a second, trust. They're willing to share. They see something in me that they're willing to be vulnerable and transparent with. I can sell them anything now. My product can be half baked, it can be in prototype stage, or it could be not as good a value or technically sound as the competitor. I'm still going to win. I love it.
Fantastic. You mentioned trust, and I talk about that a lot in other situations. And one thing I've been saying recently is the speed you can grow your business is the speed in which you can build and transfer trust.
Right.
It's how quickly can we have other people trust, and then what's the network effect of that trust. And so, how do we expand that out? And also to your other point, you were talking about sales as a part. It's all about that external, and then there's no time for pitching. And so, when I was the CEO of Velocity Selling, we would teach a 70-30 early stage conversation, 30% asking questions, 70% the customer talking, which leaves absolutely no room for pitching your thing.
Exactly.
So it's about understanding, because then you can come from it, then you can make a recommendation. And we sort of circle back to the beginning of the conversation, which is about diagnosis. We can then say, well, from what you've said, this is the answer. Or if you're really strong and you have a strong moral compass, you might also say, this is not for you. I recommend you don't buy it, which is really challenging when you're being measured on results, and those results need money in the door. So have you seen a founder, and I've sort of been thinking about this, where people have created massive success and then self-sabotage it back, much like a lottery winner who gets, hits the jackpot. And then I think the statistic is within a couple of years, they're back to in a worse financial situation. Have you seen that? And how would you coach somebody through breaking through those mental barriers to go, well, now I am worth, my mental position of myself is different to what it used to be.
Right. It's interesting. It's different with founders because it's different than entrepreneurs, because founders, you're not going to get funded. You're not going to reach mythical unicorn status unless you've got all that figured out.
Yep.
And that's one of the things that, that self-sabotage usually just prevents startups from getting out there, getting that product market fit out of the gate. And therefore you'll just perpetually spin. So you got other issues, going through that. Now, I have experienced founders where they experience imposter syndrome and they get the investment, and then their startup slowly goes into zombie territory and they exit down round or as a distressed asset. Basically, they make nothing. And I've had these conversations, these sort of debriefs, and it's been that imposter syndrome. It's been that, now I'm less than these investors, or somehow I've got in my head that I have to be doing this and doing that. And they talk about a lot how founders change when investors come in, and they forget founder mode. They forget that I'm the founder. I'm the one that got us here. I'm the innovative one. And all these investors, they're just parroting, or they're saying all the things to protect their cap tables. And I think founders can sabotage that. And that really comes down to lacking the self-awareness and having the right people in your life that can be these full-length mirrors and say, hey, there's that blind spot that you always hit. I'm going to give you some feedback. I know it's going to hurt, but I think founders can definitely allow themselves to get into a point where they self-sabotage because they don't have the constructs or the support that they need to see the forest through the trees and zig when they should zag, and vice versa. Happens all the time.
Got it. So we've spoken about joy. We've spoken about different businesses, lots of tech, lots of things. What do you get out of having a gas station?
It is a boring asset. I'll explain what I tell founders all the time. I had this conversation just this week. I tell a founder, I said, listen, I don't think you quite understand your own vision and identity as an entrepreneur. You can fall into 4 categories. You can build a lifestyle business, one about your passion or goals that you want to achieve. Maybe you want to sit on the beach and manage from Bali, or be a nomad, or things like that. Then there's the asset business, which is more like a real estate transaction or a piece of real estate where you can sell it, and therefore you've eliminated key man risk. You're not involved in it. It's just an asset. And then finally, there's this unicorn business that founders want to get into, and they want to scale to $100 million, everything like that. And then the other side is, a portfolio thereof. You're a portfolio entrepreneur. That's where I've ended up. And before, I thought it was always about the unicorn. I was just caught up in startup lifestyle. I wanted to be in Silicon Valley. I want to be in TechCrunch. And then I got introduced to family offices and private equity, and we're doing like smaller businesses, roll-up strategies. And I got to the point where cost of opportunity, I'm old, back nine of my career. I just want boring businesses that I don't have to be involved in every single day. I have to just lend my name, lend some capital, my credit. I have to sign some papers and show up for strategy every once in a while. The gas station contacts me if they need some digital signage done, right? And I say, okay, I can pull that off for you. I walk through, but there's no way I'd ever work there. My kids work there. My family members work there. But those are the types of businesses that are assets now. And later on, it cash flows really well. I could sell it if I want, and it's not attached to me emotionally. That's what I get out of it. It's just really healthy for me financially to do those types of businesses.
Yeah, very cool. And does it? I guess the cognitive load's not really there when you're just talking about how you dealt with 10 founders yesterday, and you were absolutely cooked at the end of it. The cognitive load of having this cash machine running elsewhere, I guess that gives you a little bit of happiness as well.
It's different, and I'll tell you why. I love going down, and as I was explaining, the gas station's about 2.5 hours away from me. And I love going down there, and I love cooking the Christmas dinner. I do the Easter turkey, Christmas, everything, special days. And my kids sit there. My niece and nephew are there, my sister-in-law, and we have peace. And I sit back and I feel like a patriarch. I feel like I did this. Like I've got a family lineage. It's just great. You're married. Do you have kids?
Yes, I do. Two boys.
How old are your kids?
15 and 17.
Okay. So my kids are 20 and 18, but once they start getting to the point where you've got multiple generations in one room, it feels really good as an entrepreneur, and there's no cognitive load. But the reason is because me and my sister-in-law and our family, we've worked really hard in identifying the division of labor. She leaves me alone on my stuff. She respects me for what I do. I totally respect everything that she does. They work their tails off, and they get the lion's share of all the benefits. Don't get me wrong, I get a lot of benefits from it as well. And because we can do that, and we're not squabbling over money, we're not stressing out about it. It's just going like clockwork. It's just a really smooth operation that we can enjoy family time together. To me, that is relief from all the cognitive load of the day in, day out of other things that I do. And I wouldn't trade it for anything right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. So I've just moved to the US 3 months ago, and I have never filled up my car because I live in New Jersey, and you're not allowed to fill up your own car, which is just that's not for nothing. I mean, that doesn't mean that doesn't add any value to this conversation. I was just thinking it seems really weird. I've never had to pump my own gas, and I believe it's only a Jersey thing too, right?
I have no idea. I've never filled up in Jersey. I've been there multiple times. Up here, we've got a choice. You can either go self-serve or full serve. And I've always picked the self-serve. But yeah, I could see that kind of being a trip.
It's weird. Like you can't get out of your car. I reckon they're missing out on massive amounts of revenue too, because I just know for a fact that when I go in to pay for my fuel, I'm buying a chocolate or some chips. So I think that there's money being left on the table, but that's not important for this conversation. So moving back to founders and technology, let's just go back to that, sort of taking this little tangent. So if you've got a reasonable audience, if you want founders out there to be thinking about 26 and 27, what does it look like in the future? What do you think what are the one or two things you want them to take away from this conversation that might help them make better decisions, approach their market a bit more clearly? What's the thinking heuristic you might want to have them embrace?
Right. At the point of this recording, end of the year, it's a good time to ask that question. I'd probably have different answers through the rest of the year, but right now, in this moment, the biggest piece of advice I would say is take everything that I've spoken on this podcast with a massive grain of salt. because everything's changed. AI, in the inflection points that we're seeing in the marketplace. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what's around the corner. And I've lived through this cycle enough to say I've had so many assumptions on how the world works. Principles stay the same. The neuroscience, the joy, everything that we talked about stay the same. But what to do with it and how to apply it, I think it's a big mistake to go on lagging indicators and look at Ed's life. When I was building startups, when I did my first one, it was 1998, 99. .com bubble was just starting. We were building completely different. And then I built even differently in 2009 when I did my second one that exited. I'd done many in between then. And now when I'm working on startups, I'm doing it completely different. And that's literally changing week to week because something new is coming out. And I think that founders should just get out of that cognitive bias in their head that they think they know what to do. Because on social media, I'll put out things saying, what if this is the new possibility? What if AI can do this? And we're getting to a place where AGI is going to become a thing. And just everything that we're doing has become obsolete, like even now. And so many just either attack me or say, what Kool-Aid are you drinking? Ed, this is irresponsible for you to talk this way. You're just saying this to get clicks and memes and people talk about you and, build your audience, get views. But I'm legitimately asking those questions. I'm being dialogic about it. And I'm not doing it to offend anyone. I'm doing it to stir the pot because I just fundamentally know everything has changed and will continue to change at an accelerated rate. Therefore, I just think founders need to embrace that, be curious, ask the right questions, but throw the playbooks out the door and build your own new ones because those are the ones that are going to get funded. Like what Peter Thiel says, the next person who builds Facebook won't look like Facebook or won't be Mark Zuckerberg. It will look nothing like that. And we don't even know what that looks like. Everything's changing. I think that's the way to go right now in this point of time.
Fantastic. I love that. Look, I'm going to ask you one last question. So if you were to think about, your journey over time, the people that you advise, the companies you work with, what's the one or two things that you would specifically unlearn if you were to go start a new business today?
That's another loaded question. You're asking some really great questions. You're getting me thinking. It's like mental gymnastics and, it's a workout. To be very philosophical with it right now, it's the only way that I can think of. I would unlearn what I think about myself.
Love that.
Here's a statement that really hit me. I forgot his name. I apologize for not quoting this author. But he said, I am not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am. Right? Yep. It's a loaded statement, but it's back and forth. And it talks about how we perceive things. And I would have embraced that earlier and unlearned what I think I am. Or I would have unlearned what other people think that I am and getting too tied up about it. And I would have tried to find that balance of saying, what, I'm being defined by what I think Matthew thinks I am in this moment. I would have unlearned all those things that got stuck and I would have embraced that principle. And I probably would have made less mistakes. I probably have better mental health outcomes than I do right now and save myself a lot of heartache and pain. Not to say I regret it because it helps other people now and there's a redemption arc to it. But if you're really pressing me, I would unlearn my view, how I saw myself the first way, and then I unlearn how I think other people see me. That's what I do.
Ed, thank you so much. We've covered philosophy, we've covered strategy, we've covered sales. How doesn't get better on a Friday afternoon. Thank you
It's
so
been enjoyable. Yeah,
thank you so much for taking the time today. If anybody wants to know more about Ed, of course, you can find him on YouTube. He breaks down the pitch decks for people. Obviously, startups.com, incredible community. It seems to have incredible network effects where members help members. It is a perfect example of the network effects. I've actually found a developer from that network. I didn't need to tell you that to help me with my startup. Because I couldn't write it. Last time I wrote a line of code was in high school in '92, so that's a long time ago. It's a very much I guess a perishable skill, that space. So I keep up to date with sales and marketing. Everything else is withering. So look, Ed, if anybody out there is thinking about building a startup, go to startups.com. It's an incredible community. I found my home there. Even though I've only been in the States for a couple of months, I've found some incredible people, met some wonderful entrepreneurs, and just had these interesting conversations that occur all the time. So Ed, thank you for being part of that community and bringing that community to life with your, I guess, hosting and management of that. Thank you so much for that. Thank you once again for being part of the podcast.
My pleasure. You're welcome. Let's do it again.
Good on you. See you, mate. Bye now.